Welcome to the You at Your Best podcast. I'm your host, Morgan. Before we get into the episode, let me give a little bit of an introduction for anyone who's new. If you like listening to someone process life in real time, or you are neurodivergent, an overthinker, a perfectionist, or maybe feel things deeply, this is the podcast for you. This is a non-professional, very human podcast about choosing authenticity over performance. My goal is to remind you to always come back to yourself. I talk about very deep things. I don't avoid vulnerability, but I trust you to know what resonates, what feels safe, and what might be too much for you right now. And I also share a journal prompt at the end of every single episode to help you think. So join me if you want to create a life that actually feels like you, so that you can become you at your best. All right, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode. Hello, welcome back. I hope you're doing well. I'm recording this episode in the morning, and anytime I record episodes in the mornings, my voice sounds like way deeper and kind of more raspier. So if my voice sounds weird, that's why. This week's episode is going to be about integration. But before we get into the episode, I just want to talk a little bit, just give some updates. So I'm actually recording this episode on Friday, so 2 days before it comes out, because we have been so busy. I started taking Zoloft or sertraline a little bit before my daughter's birthday, so like 2 episodes ago I was taking it, but I haven't had time to sit down and actually talk about it. Today is day 24, I think, and it's slowly getting better. Like, taking Zoloft is just really, in the beginning it's really difficult. I was having headaches, I was struggling a lot, and I actually started getting really bad intrusive thoughts, really scary intrusive thoughts. And I went to my psychiatrist, and I was finally diagnosed with OCD, which is great. I felt so much relief because I feel like I've spent so long trying to get a diagnosis and being dismissed. I've known about me possibly having OCD since 2022, and now it's 2026 and I just now got diagnosed. But I spent months trying to talk about it. I went to someone new. I ended up going to a psychiatrist, and I'm planning to start going to an actual therapist too, actually one that my friend recommended to me. And it's been weird, but I'm officially diagnosed with OCD, and that's really great. I feel like I can actually talk about it now. And yeah, but anyways, that's kind of my update. Life has been so busy, so crazy. That's why I'm recording this episode late. My daughter stayed the night with my mom last night, so my boyfriend and I just spent all day yesterday relaxing. We were so tired. And this morning I'm recording this episode. So like I said, this episode is about integration. I've spent a lot of my episodes recently reflecting on integration. This idea that when different versions of us stop fighting, they finally start making sense as one whole person. I feel like I've really been focused on that theme here lately. I want to spend a little bit more time reflecting on this idea and talking a little bit more about it. So I want to start off with a story. So I have recently been re-uploading a lot of my older episodes. I didn't re-upload all of them because I can't find all of them, but the ones that I could find, I re-uploaded them, and there are a couple that I never uploaded that are now up. So now I have 72 episodes. It took me so long to upload all of these episodes. Whenever I first started doing it, I started editing the episodes, and I realized that there was no point in editing them. They're fine just as they are. And as I was uploading them, I felt so proud. In the past, I never wanted to upload these episodes because I felt embarrassed by them. I felt like that part of me shouldn't be seen or shown in a public light. And I only wanted people to know who I am now that I've healed a lot more. And that in itself was a form of not healing for me. It was a form of immaturity for me, even being embarrassed by who I was in the past, whenever who I was in the past is what got me here. And I wouldn't be myself without the past me. But I just felt proud of those episodes. Not because the episodes are perfect, they're definitely not. Some of them are pretty unkind to myself and sometimes to others. I gave some advice that was built on this idea of being unkind to yourself as a way to grow. But I feel proud of those episodes because they're all a part of my story. And looking at all 72 episodes sitting together made me realize something that I don't think I've ever put into words before. I don't feel like multiple different people anymore. I feel like one person. I feel consistent. Looking at those episodes, although they're a past version of me, they're still me. And it's honestly kind of cool looking back and thinking like, that was me. I can listen to it and feel myself in the episodes instead of listening to them from a distance now. Because in the past, I used to separate myself into different versions. I had like old Morgan, healing Morgan, mom Morgan, podcaster Morgan, current Morgan. There were a bunch of different versions of me, almost like they were different people. And it felt like the only way to understand myself. I feel like for a lot of us, it's so easy to look back at old versions of ourselves and almost see them as like strangers, see old versions of ourselves as like someone that we don't know anymore, because shame sometimes creates distance. Whenever you feel shame about who you were in the past or struggles that you had in the past, it can be really easy to distance yourself from that person, even though that person and that version of you got you here today. It can be really easy to disown parts of ourselves that were actually incredibly helpful on our journey and were necessary. And I remember I just kept on seeing past versions of me almost as if it wasn't me. I kept on talking about her like she wasn't me. Like it wasn't my body, my voice, my brain. But for me, deciding to re-upload all of those older episodes really changed something within me. I find myself scrolling through all of those old episodes and just feeling so happy, almost like I'm romanticizing that part of me. Looking back at old versions of me, listening back to those episodes and realizing that I may have not been perfect, but I had a really good idea on things that I sometimes forget at this point in my life, things that may seem surface level actually being so important. I remember during that time of my life, I was romanticizing every little part. I was in college. I was romanticizing college time. And although I was struggling a lot, I've always had this really noticeable way of helping people. And right now, looking back at that older version of me in those older episodes, I don't feel like she was broken anymore. I don't feel like she was fake. She definitely wasn't an embarrassment. What was happening was that she was living with a nervous system that didn't feel safe yet. And now my nervous system feels so safe that I can look back at her. But like I said, she always had hope. She loved creating. She always believed that something meaningful was ahead. She always believed in herself. She always believed that something meaningful was ahead, so she kept on restarting. Not because she failed, but because she never stopped believing in herself. Looking back, it doesn't feel like she didn't know me. A lot of people look back at their old selves and they think like, I know you, but you don't know me. She did know me. She knew I was coming. It feels like she always did. She was just waiting for this version of herself to show up. So whenever it comes to integration, it usually doesn't feel very dramatic. It kind of feels just like less divided, because healing doesn't erase parts of you. It creates whole parts of who you are. It finds all of those little individual things that maybe don't feel like they make sense together and finally understands why they do make sense. The parts of you that are terrified, the parts of you that are hopeful, that are creative, that are perfectionistic, playful, being a parent, being a podcaster. For me, the girl who recorded episodes in 2023 and who I am right now sitting here recording this episode. It's almost like they're all finally sitting at the same table. None of them have to leave. All parts of me are right here. And I used to think that healing meant becoming someone that my younger self would admire, but I don't think that anymore. Now it kind of feels more like healing is becoming someone who can sit beside her, be there for her, be her guide. Because even back then, I saw my potential, that I would be the one to save me and I would be the one to grow, and I didn't need other people to save me. I just needed to trust myself. So for me, there are things that have changed. I have become different than I was then, but there are also parts of me that always stayed. Like my hope, my dreams, my creativity, my curiosity, my desire to help people. Those things have always been here. They've always been me ever since the second I was born, it kind of feels like. But the things that have changed don't actually change anything about who I am, but change how I treat myself. So my relationship to myself has changed so much. I'm so much kinder to myself. I don't feel this need to disown who I am to grow like I did in the past. Another one is my nervous system is so much more calm now, and I think with taking the meds, that's also helped a lot. My nervous system is just like so at peace almost. I don't feel like I'm in constant fight or flight. And a lot of that has happened because of the meds, but a lot of it has also happened because of my years of growing and learning and almost like dissecting my own brain and testing what works and figuring out that the best thing that works is to just be kind to myself. In every single situation, there's no need to shame ourselves ever. Obviously, if we messed up, it's okay to admit to those things, but never through the lens of, I hate myself, more through the lens of, I messed up, I should have done better, but I still deserve kindness. And the biggest thing that has changed is actually feeling safe enough to be seen. In the past, I really was terrified of being seen, despite constantly putting myself out there. That was a part of why I would constantly restart my podcast. I just had this belief that people didn't like me, that people would listen to my podcast and think, like, this is a horrible person, this is a horrible podcast. And now I don't really feel like that. There may be people that don't like my podcast, and that's totally okay. But now I feel more like I love who I am. And even if I'm struggling sometimes, even if I have moments where I go back to that old mindset, I still love parts of me that I hated in the past. And for me, it's like, looking back, the foundation of who I am was always there. Healing just gave it a solid ground to stand on. And I can't believe I just used a metaphor. I think that was a metaphor. But looking back at all of the 72 episodes that I now have, not feeling embarrassed, not needing to hide them. And none of it is because I've became perfect. I'm still someone that struggles a lot. I'm still someone that messes up, who has to rethink and sometimes falls back into those old toxic patterns and toxic headspaces. But because I'm no longer trying to separate who I am now from who I was in the past. And I kind of like picture all of these different versions of me sitting around a table, and none of them are being kicked out. They're just together. Maybe it's the quiet moment when every version of you finally realizes we are the same person. We're on the same team. So for me, integration, I don't think it's about becoming a new person. I think it's about the moment when all different versions of you stop competing for your identity, and you don't feel like you have to constantly change who you are to fit into certain molds. You don't feel like you have to choose which person you're going to be. You get to just exist exactly as you are, even if you feel contradictory to other people. And next week's episode will be a little bit on this, but after that, I don't know if I'll talk much more about integration for a while. Not because it's not important, but because I feel like I've focused on it so much. So for this week's journal prompt, I want you to reflect on what parts of you you're rejecting. And that can be really hard sometimes. Sometimes you can be trying to think and like nothing comes up. But over time, just really think about that and give yourself a week to just pay attention. And anytime you feel like you're rejecting something about yourself or you're shaming yourself about something, write it down and then journal about all of those things together and kind of figure it out a little bit better. Okay, that's all for today. If something in this episode resonated, share it with a friend who needs a little reminder that they're not alone. If you want more conversations like these, be sure to follow and rate this podcast. Downloading this episode is one of the best ways to help this podcast grow, so be sure to do that. If you want to find me on social media, all of my links are in my link tree in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next Sunday.